the law of participation, the 90%, 9%, 1% rule, where 90% of people aren't going to do anything, 9% are going to kind of do something, 1% maybe will be engaged, right? She thinks, and she's seen data that shows that it's shifting to be a much greater number of engaged people, but with a more focused audience.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Robert Schmidt. I'm Deloitte's Chief IoT Technologist. Welcome to Coffee with Mr IoT. My guest today is Chris Heuer. We actually met when we both worked at Deloitte, right?
Well, a little afterwards, while you were CIO of Activision on your little brief stint away, and we got to do that little unconference thing with you guys.
That's right.
That was a lot of fun.
Chris, today you are the founder of Mentor Bureau.
Correct. It's a new startup we just did.
Startup. Awesome, awesome. Congrats. And you actually call yourself on LinkedIn. I have to ask you about this. Entrepreneur in residence. What does that mean?
Yes. What does that mean? That means I hang out in a residence. But no, it's kind of, there's multiple versions of it.
Is it a startup term?
It is. It's actually for accelerators, and actually VCs use it more than anything else. It typically had referred to in the past the person who had been in a startup, sold the startup, and then was hanging out, figuring out their next startup.
Okay, got it.
But just like the term mentor has been adopted by all the accelerators and misused a little bit, then so has this term. And for the work that we're doing now, it's important because I am actually assigning mentors to each of our clients. And then for all of them, I'm the entrepreneur in residence, overseeing the program and helping all of them to advance and do what we call smooth scaling. Because we're really, really kind of fed up with all of this pursuit of unicorns, when we know there's only so many LeBron Jameses out there. There's only so many Jack Dorseys, right? So how do we actually help the rest of the entrepreneurs create successful, sustainable businesses? And that's by not burning money, not burning people, but by figuring out systems that allow us to scale a little more smoothly.
That's awesome. It's so interesting, right? I feel like I've been in larger companies most of my career, and I almost feel like out of my place. Not just that you have the more colorful shirt today than I do, which that's a new thing for me.
Yeah, but you got me beat on the glasses big time. That's amazing.
It's an awesome shirt. But also the whole startup thing, I guess there's a terminology that really is different, and it's fascinating. So we are here at South by Southwest. I've been here a few times. You've been here a lot.
Yes.
What is South by? That's what people call it for short, South by. What is South by Southwest?
Well, what it really is it's a great collision space, is one of the ways that I think of it. I'm very fortunate, as you are, to have many colleagues from around the world, and this is one of the few places where a lot of them get together at the same time. So very much it's a reunion for me. Okay. But it originally started, for us anyways, we started coming at the beginning of the Web 2.0 era. So back in like 07-ish, around there, right when Twitter broke, essentially. And for me, it's about the holistic sort of approach. And what I really love about it is it's not just technology. It's not just like music, which I love, or it's not just film. It's also now about corporate responsibility, education, diversity, gaming. It is really this more interdisciplinary thing. And that was my degree, communications, law, economics, and government. So I've always been an interdisciplinary guy, so I get stimulated and new ideas, and I look at all the different industries for different patterns and how we might be able to apply them to the work that we're doing.
So South by takes over Austin, right?
Yes.
You live here now, right? You moved here actually a while ago, right?
Yes, 3 years now.
3 years ago. So does Austin totally change when South by comes in?
Oh yeah. It's actually more awesome in many ways.
More awesome.
Yeah, because you don't have to wait in line and you're not, scrambling to get out of the way of all the scooters now and all that stuff. And the people are a little more chill. In fact, there's a lot of...
You mean when there's no South by?
Yes, yes, because there's a big exodus of people who don't want to be here, and then there's a big exodus of people who are paying off their mortgage for the year by renting out their place on Airbnb.
Oh my God, that's funny. You stayed. You said it's a reunion for you with people. Whom did you reunite this time with so far?
Oh gosh, so many people. My friend Brian Solis just launched a new book called Lifescale. Which is really about the snapback effect that actually the Megatrends 2000 book talked about. Anyways, I really love that. It's really important time. I think we need to slow down so we can go faster. But Jeremiah Owyang, let's see here, Jeannie Cusack, who's a master in customer experience. oh gosh, Greg Narain, who just moved to Denver. Let's see here. I'm going down to Australia actually in a few weeks to work with an accelerator down there for a few months. So I met a whole bunch of people from the Australian Trade Commission. So those are new meets. But it's just on and on and on. And it's just the random kind of drive-by where you bump into people on the street.
Didn't we run into each other Sunday night?
Yes.
We were both at an event at the JW Marriott, and we ran into each other, so that was fun.
Absolutely. And that's the amazing stuff. And, I don't want to get into the whole synchronicity, serendipity, whatever you want to call it, but I was also a big fan, as you know, of Hegel's work and John Seeley Brown's, and his talk of that serendipity about needing to be an executive who gets out. That's the exact sort of thing that happens when you do. But what also happens, because I've also seen you, I think in an airport a couple of years ago when we were running by each other or something, is that you end up in these orbits with the same people. And those orbits eventually, overlap and you run into each other and you get those opportunities. So
I'm glad our orbits overlapped today.
Yes, thank you.
So you talked about South by being film, music. They call it interactive, which I love. It's not digital, it's not like it's interactive. Is gaming actually separate, or is gaming part of interactive? I think it's separate, isn't it?
It's separate. They have a separate track for gaming, just as they do for education, and they've been working on a government one, and yeah, it's very
How is Southwest different from an E3 for gaming, for example, or from CES for interactive? What makes it different here?
Well, it's more heterogeneous relative to it, right? It's just all of these different personalities. And for years, people have been talking about South by jumping the shark because it's, the big brand activation came and took over. It did for a while. I don't think it is so much this year. I think it's got some of that spirit back. And I think one of the reasons why is that it's either further distributed geographically, so the density isn't so bad, so you're not standing in line all night to try to get in somewhere. But it's really hard to say. Right now, I had a great time this year. I learned a lot. I met incredible people. I had great conversations, obviously focusing on a new business, so it's a good time to have all that business development opportunity and partnership stuff. But so it is a place where stuff gets done as well as where you learn things. And I think that's what's missed in most people's view of it. And people don't like change. Even the people who drive change sometimes don't like change.
Well, it's good to make change for you, but don't make change for me.
Exactly, exactly. So when we have something different, people respond differently to that. And I think a lot of it was just that sort of, oh gosh, the nostalgia of the good old days. And it is different, but that doesn't mean it's not better. And this year I felt it was much better.
One of the things that when you said this, I hadn't thought of it before. I was here, I think, 3 years ago, and maybe it was 2, I can't remember, but it was the year when Austin shut off Lyft.
Yes.
And it was impossible to get around. There was no Lyft, there was no Uber. It's like, I was what am I doing, It was like CES, right? Where there was for a long time no Lyft in Vegas. And this year, actually, what South by has done is they've really ramped up the scooters, right?
Yeah, well,
so therefore, this sort of personal traveling has changed in a significant way. There's Lyft and there's Uber, but there's also all the scooters around, and they're doing actually a nice job, I think, every morning to rack them up and kind of like cordon off areas and so forth. Do you feel that's part of it too, that they kind of like bring back alternative approaches?
Well, I still have blisters on my feet from walking for 14 hours a day, but I was able to get to many more places. I ended up cutting them all off, but I had about 18 wristbands that I had.
Yeah, I was looking for them.
Yeah, and I finally, you shower with it 3 times, they get kind of ruined. But the scooter thing, we've had them for a while now. And in fact, I live up in the north central suburbs. Around 53rd Street. So we're on 7th now, I believe, right? So whatever, that's not too far north, it's about 10 minutes. And we have those drop-offs in our neighborhood. So literally they're on like suburban street corners where they've been dropping off 3 or 4 scooters. And it really is an incredible solution for the last mile. But you also have to have some confidence in some minor athletic ability, because I know people who won't get on them because they're scared to death they're going to die.
Well, and it's wet today, right? And when it gets wet, those little wheels don't do so well. By the way, talking about where we are, a big thank you to Capital Factory. They're hosting us today, and we get to sit in their studio, which is really comfortable and great. So just want to thank them too.
Yeah.
So you talked about the people you met. What were some of the interesting stories, the interesting topics that you heard that sort of got you thinking, blew your mind, changed your mind maybe in some ways?
You know, Joseph Jaffe just came out with a new book called Built to Suck. And I saw him deliver
Built to Suck?
Built to Suck,
All
yeah.
right.
About how most big corporations today are built to suck. But that it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's like embracing your inner demons and figuring out how to wrestle with it. But you have to be able to acknowledge it. But one of the things that I've been talking about a lot over the past year is the concept of agile planning. And like oxymoron, what is that? People don't get it. But I think I finally found a better way to explain it because Joseph talks about this in the book. It's actually about long-term thinking, short-term actions. And how do we actually, you know, still have that vision for where we're trying to go, but make actions that we need to do over the next month, the next day, the next quarter even really, I guess, that will help us to get there. So I was really excited to hear some of that. Also see as well, I was at the Sprinkler Lounge at one point listening to a couple people talk, and we've been talking about proactive customer care now since David Sherbuck reached out to a friend of ours at FeedBurner back in 2005 when he had a laptop issue, and he mentioned, or in 2006 when he mentioned it on Twitter, and he proactively FedExed him a new Lenovo laptop because he was an influencer. And that's really the first major social influencer complaining about something and then getting it resolved. But it really said, this is what companies should be doing. You shouldn't wait for people to come to you to go ahead and complain because chances are you're not hearing from 98% of them. There's only a few who are going to be brave enough to be kind of rude in some cases, unfortunately, but to say something about it. So actually the trend now from the smart customer care or modern customer care, I believe is what Sprinkler calls it, is that there's a greater shift now finally to that proactive. And I've been waiting over 10 years for that. So seeing those things come to fruition is really nice.
I heard this, it must be 6-7 years ago or maybe longer, at the Dreamforce conference. There was a number about how I think it was more than half of the people expect the response when they put a complaint on Twitter.
Yes.
And back then, this felt to me like I'm standing at any corner of the street, raise my hand, and expect the public service bus to stop. Because it doesn't happen, right? It's like, you know, why would I need to go to a bus stop for a bus to stop? And so that was like a crazy idea to me that Twitter would be the media to go and complain about something. And now I have like figured this out, right? When I go and sometimes Lyft cancels rides on me when they're too long and it really annoys me. And when something happens, I just write @Lyft, and gosh, they are great.
Yeah.
5 minutes, 8 minutes, it's really amazing what has happened. Do you think it actually has also changed Twitter in a way that Twitter has become, instead of a quick sharing of information, a complaint platform?
It might be one of the only reasons it's still alive at the volume that it's at. Obviously, people still connect there and that, but the majority of it has turned into a news gathering. I mean, myself even, I look at moments, I look for the top posts from the people I've been reading a lot about, and then I'll search for certain tracks, trying to find something. Like last night, there's a number of fire trucks running around town late at night, and I was like, oh gosh, what's happening? You know, so I want to turn in to find that out. So it's still obviously a valuable news source and much more, but if it weren't for the corporations embracing it and finally opening it up as a customer care channel, I don't know, you know, how much business you would do on it. They've tried to do some commerce things, as you know, over the years. I haven't seen much success out of that. Occasionally there have been some winning products. It's probably like the same level of success that a viral marketing campaign has. Sometimes you get lightning in a bottle and you capture it, and then most of the time you don't. But yeah, Twitter has definitely been changed by that, as has corporations, because they were forced to go to where the customers were. The problem still, though, is, as you know, is that you can go ahead and try to call them, and they don't respond. You can't even find a number probably for Lyft. I've never tried, but I can't.
Why would I call someone if I get a response on Twitter in like
Exactly.
2 or 3 minutes? I wait longer to have someone, please hold, please hold, please hold.
Yeah.
You know, it's a much faster response. I love chat on websites, by the way, for support, right? Because if they are empowered, it's really powerful. It doesn't take the same amount of time. So do you think call centers are impacted by that?
Greatly, but what they've done is, and I've watched the evolution over the years because we were advocating for this. I mean, this is part of what I was doing at Deloitte with the social business practice, and then through Deloitte Digital a little bit, was trying to educate them how to use these new channels. The one bit that got lost in that education is still that all channels should be relatively equal. And unfortunately, the way that they evolved was they said, okay, we're going to get like our best people. We're going to train them in these new skills because they're capable. And then those are the only ones who do it, which is why you get the great response, and they know what to do and they know how to solve stuff, and then you still call up on the phone and you're put on hold for 30 minutes and all that other stuff that happens. So the other bit that I don't see a lot of is still that it's reactive in many ways like that, right? They're still not out looking for opportunities to find new brand ambassadors or to recruit people. There's a push, as you've seen in social sales, where LinkedIn has become terrible with the amount of sales spam that I get, right? But the proactive customer, I used to call them digital diplomats. How do we actually recruit digital diplomats to kind of engage with us? There's been this talk, and this is actually another talk coming back to your earlier question about things that I learned. Rachel Hoppe does the Community Roundtable, and they put out this annual report on community management, and it's fantastic. They've been doing it for a number of years, I think 10. I think it's the 10-year anniversary from here, and I was at the launch, so I kind of know them. But what she was saying is this idea that we've talked about, and you and I have talked about this before, the law of participation, the 90%, 9%, 1% rule, where 90% of people aren't going to do anything, 9% are going to kind of do something, 1% maybe will be engaged, right? She thinks, and she's seen data that shows that it's shifting, be a much greater number of engaged people, but with a more focused audience. So for instance, on shaving cream, right? Not everyone wants to talk to a shaving cream brand, but the master shavers do, barbers do, and so they're getting more engagement from those people who are more closely aligned with the context or subject matter or the market that they're actually serving, as opposed to thinking about it in broad consumer terms. So consumer packaged goods, we don't see quite as much engagement, although Dove obviously has done some really great things, even with the Real Men Care and some of that other stuff they've done. But broadly speaking, it's really about knowing who those stakeholders are who care about you.
How do you feel today when you go and you find advertisement that's clearly targeted to you, and then I often go and I scratch my head, it's like, what did I do that they remembered this and showed me that targeted ad? I get so many friends telling me they feel creeped out by this.
Yes.
How do you personally feel about that?
Well, the biggest creep out that's been happening a lot with many of my friends is that they'll talk about something and then they get an ad for it later, on Facebook in particular. And whether or not they've enabled the microphone on their Messenger app or on any of the other devices, don't know what that data is being used for. So there is a good reason to be fearful of some of this stuff. But for the most part, if it's based on my search history.
Do you use voice?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I haven't seen it to the degree that some of my friends have. I don't know why, but like one of my friends was talking with somebody when they were driving between LA and Vegas about prefab steel warehouses or sheds or whatever, big stuff. And when he got back to the hotel room, that was one of the first things that he saw when he logged onto Facebook. So like that's kind of weird because it was just in the car with him. So I've never seen that per se, but I've definitely seen some of the stuff. And ideally, it could be relevant. But the problem is that you don't really understand the full context when all you're looking for is phrases. And so they're going to have to get that technology a little bit better. And actually, one of the startups I've been working with in the Google Launchpad Accelerator over in Japan is doing emotional analysis for voice commerce. And so they're starting to understand better intent, emotional state, and those sorts of things. So I think in the next couple of years, it'll get refined more. Whether or not they get the chance because they've creeped out too many people and now the FTC is regulating them, we'll see soon.
I have two questions go through my head, and you pick which one you want to answer because I can't quite, sometimes I don't know. Question one was, I saw a really, really interesting startup that has Bluetooth tags that harness the power that's around us through RF to power themselves.
Oh, awesome.
So my question for you is, what really interesting startups have you seen this week at South by? The other question is a totally different one. When we talked about social, one of the things that fascinates me. There's so much out there. The noise is so big, people can't even filter through that. This is why AI and machine learning is so powerful in my mind. You having any ethical sort of concerns about AI with that? Particularly, there was this really awesome news story, I thought it was amazing, about Facebook teaching Messenger how to sell. And eventually they realized that it was pushing too hard in sales. There was a whole story. Did you read that?
I did.
So anyhow, you can answer both of which one.
Well,
I don't know.
I'll hit the first one quick because the few startups that I saw that were really cool are not ready to be talked about yet. So I can't really talk about that stuff. But in your space, actually, I went to a Smart House event, cocktail event and panel over at Yonomi. And I had known about them from years ago, but I hadn't realized how far they came to become really a sort of unifying platform for all the different smart home devices. But more importantly, adding the AI component, I got a bridge for this, is actually creating learning routines and then actually developing templates from everyone else. Because the problem with if this then that is you have to go in and program it and have the intention of I want to do this, and their discovery is not that great really in this stuff. You have to pay attention to it as a news stream in order to really discover new patterns or new ways of doing it. But they make all that stuff accessible for like when you drive up and you open the garage door, play my music, turn on the lights in these rooms.
So it remembers your routine, it learns your pattern.
I don't know that I could say that specifically, but it does give you easier recipes or easier formats to be able to create those. I think they call them templates is what they call them. So I had a 30-minute conversation with them, so I can't go too deep. But I did download it on the spot, and once I get home for more than like 30 minutes or an hour of sleep, I'm going to go ahead and set it up and turn on the routines. Moving to the second question on the AI, the biggest concern I've had, and I'm very fortunate with the work I've been doing with Google to work with Peter Norvig, who's like the guy who literally wrote the textbook on AI, and a whole bunch of other amazing people there like Malika Cantor and just some really smart people. And we've had some amazing startups in the healthcare space, in the fintech space. Healthcare stuff that I've seen there is just mind-blowing. They're using AI technology to figure out what parts of, and this is an Israeli company, figure out what parts of the brain they might be able to stimulate to help people who have been paralyzed learn to walk again. And the early results are just fantastic. But that sort of advancement—
And that's through AI?
Yeah, because what they're doing is they're doing pattern mapping across the brain and the nerves, and they're able to do modeling, and they're able to get feedback loops that the machine learns of what was successful and what wasn't. What created a stimulus actually, in the extremity that wasn't happening before. I can't speak to all the trials and all the other stuff, so I don't want to, but I mean, when you start looking at that type of impact, it really is like game-changing, earth-changing, human species changing at the end of the day. But the problem with this environment, as with media and everything else before it, is that we're bringing our unconscious biases into it. And so the thing that actually concerns me about AI and machine learning is that 3 or 2 white guys like you and I, we have our own unique set of the world. We're not biased or prejudiced, but we still have unconscious biases we're not aware of.
Well, I know I am. And it's interesting when I find out, and sometimes I'm okay with it and sometimes I'm not. But
yeah, but you have to have that moment of realization, and if you think about it, that's because we're in our 40s. And as a result of that, I know, I'm still in my 40s for 6 more months, so I can kind of say that. But we've been through a life of experiences, and we have a greater sense. We've had those experiences, we've had those failures. We faced those moments where we had egg on our face from saying something stupid that we didn't mean because we didn't realize it. Whereas 3 19-year-olds who have been programming together and are geniuses at their algorithms don't know what they are. And then we're starting to rely on them. And we talked a lot in the early days of social media, and I forget the gentleman's name who wrote the book, but the filter bubble, and how just by your self-selection of who you follow and what you read, you're putting yourself in a bubble or an echo chamber of common thought. So those sorts of things really concern me. So every time I get a chance to talk about AI and that's the issue I've been bringing up so that more people will be aware of it, and we can actually build this for good.
So this is interesting. I want to hook in this one more time. Unconscious bias, isn't the counter side to this really deep in expertise? You talk about the bubble, but isn't the bubble also I've spent over 10,000 hours in something I'm particularly good at? And I bring this to the AI?
Well,
when does special expertise become bias?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and you know, obviously you're making me look up and to the right and think and pull that up, so that's pretty good. But you know, that's an interesting point.
Maybe
because
you need to look down left.
You know what? No, everything's up to the right, man. I was at Deloitte. I know it's up and to the right, up and to the right. So it's actually the interesting there relative to it is actually when it becomes when your income and your revenue becomes dependent upon it. At least that's what we see, obviously, with corporations right now. They get in a pattern, they don't want to kill off their cash cow, and as a result of that, you know, they're getting their lunches eaten by startups because they never even imagined that somebody could do this thing. I mean, I'm facing that right now with what I'm doing, and it's not even that radical from a technology. I mean, it's system changing, but people are just like, that's not possible. You're never going to actually, you know, replace venture capital with human capital. It's just not going to be the thing that drives the system. I'm like, no, we have to do that. And like, it takes one person to say, do that.
You use economic drivers to sort of make this distinction between bias versus expertise.
That would be how I would frame it in that sense, because you know, you're held back by what you don't know, and what you don't know that you don't know, obviously. But sometimes you can be constrained by what you do know, because you believe so deeply in that thought and your experience with it, that when the world has changed fundamentally, like we have in the last 10 years, entering a truly connected society, going back to your Twitter customer support, and even the birds and the limes and Uber scooters and all the rest of that stuff. You know, the fundamentals have changed so much that if you haven't actually experienced emotionally, intellectually, and experientially the differences and how it makes you feel different, how it provides a different value, you might not ever see it.
Got it. So.
Is that it? We're going to race each other? And so
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
so
man, I'm screwed. Up here for lunch. Yeah, I got it. Okay. I've got tons of excuses I can come up with if you want me to.
Awesome. No, just do it again if you.
It was the wind.
Yes, it was.
The wind. Look at you. This is awesome.
Well, I want to go all the way down.
Keep going. Just, that's it. Okay, that's a new record.
That was a 26.
You just beat me.
Let's hear it for video gamers, man.
Awesome.
Dude,
good for you.
Yeah, you're so lucky, by the way, with that Activision role. Like, that was so cool, man.
That was a good time.
Thank you so very much. That's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much, Chris, for being on the show. I appreciate it. Our coffee chat is coming to an end. Thank you for watching Coffee with Mr IoT. And if you missed any of today's episode or past episodes, please check out my YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe down there. Have a good one. Bye. You should try my glasses. They fit with your outfit.
Oh, yeah. I went with my simple glasses today. Oh, wow. That's not so bad. You got good eyes. Yeah. You got good eyes.